What's up, everyone? I'm back again today with some more New York Knicks news. So it was reported last week that the Knicks and the Nets are both monitoring Zach Levine's situation with the Bulls. Would the Bulls actually trade Levine though? Well, Levine has put up very impressive numbers over his last couple of seasons with the Bulls. But despite those numbers, the Bulls haven't been doing any winning. It does seem possible that if Levine were to go to the Bulls front office and demand a trade, that they would entertain trading him if they were to receive a good offer. So, should the Knicks trade for Zach Levine? This may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say no. And in this video, I'm going to explain why. Before we continue, I'd appreciate it if you guys would drop a like on the video and subscribe. I love making content like this for you guys, and supporting the channel by subscribing really helps me to produce more dope videos like this. Now let's go ahead and continue. Before I explain my reasons for why I would opt out of a Zach Levine trade, let's just quickly go over the type of player that Zach Levine is. Zach Levine was selected 13th overall by the Timberwolves in the 2014 draft. Coming into the NBA, what scouts love so much about Levine was his incredible explosiveness and athleticism, and his potential as a shot creator. Levine did not disappoint. 3 years into his career, he was averaging close to 20 points per game for the Timberwolves, and he won the slam dunk contest. Unfortunately for Levine, in the middle of a career year, he tore his ACL, which caused him to miss the rest of the season. The Wolves then shipped him off to the Bulls in a trade that landed them Jimmy Butler. Since being traded and recovering from surgery, Levine has come back a much better athlete. Last season, Levine averaged a career-high 23.7 points per game, and this year, he's taken it to another level, averaging 25.5 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, and 4.2 assists on 45% shooting from the field, 38% from three, and 80% from the free throw line. These are undoubtedly all-star level numbers. Levine hasn't made an all-star team yet or taken any team to the playoffs, but it's clear he's a very good player. Despite the incredible numbers, I would opt out of a trade for Levine for a few reasons. Reason number one is that a trade for Levine is going to cost the Knicks a lot of assets. He's going to cost the Knicks young talent and draft picks, and as a rebuilding team, I don't think the Knicks should be giving that up. Reason number two is that I'm not convinced Levine is a winning player yet. Yes, he puts up incredible numbers, but I think he's a lot closer to an empty stats player than a true all-star level player that helps you get wins. And lastly, Zach Levine is a major flight risk as he's set to become an unrestricted free agent in just 2 years. At this point, let's go into these reasons a lot more in depth. So the first reason I wouldn't trade for Levine is because I think the asking price for him is going to be too high. The Bulls aren't going to just give Levine away. He's fresh off averaging 25 points per game on very good efficiency. The Bulls are probably going to want a really good young player in return for Levine, along with at least one first-round pick. The Bulls, at the minimum, are going to ask for at least one of RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. Now, I would think the Knicks would be more inclined to give up RJ since he plays the same position as Levine. This is what I project a trade for Levine would look like. The Knicks are going to have to give up at least RJ Barrett, Dennis Smith Jr., and the Dallas pick that they own in 2021. Elfrid Payton is just a throw-in to match salaries. Now, some of you guys may say this is too much, but I'm pretty sure landing Levine means giving up at least one of RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson, plus a first-round pick. Remember, not only is Levine's value high, but other teams like the Nets are going to have interest in Levine. This could create a bidding war, so the Knicks are not going to be able to acquire Levine for cheap. Would this trade package be worth it? I would say no. I think the Knicks should just focus on rebuilding. A lot of people are low on RJ Barrett, but I believe in his potential. He was top 5 in multiple statistical categories amongst rookies, including points, boards, and fouls drawn per game. I believe RJ will be an all-star, even better than Zach Levine. Now, at the moment, Levine is miles ahead of RJ, but I believe Barrett will become a player that can impact the game in more ways than Levine can. RJ Barrett is already a way better defender than Levine was in his first year. Now, RJ isn't an elite defender by any means, but his defense in his rookie year was solid, while Levine has been one of the worst wing defenders in the league throughout most of his career. Also, I believe RJ has potential to be a much better playmaker. His assist numbers weren't high in his rookie year, but he also didn't get the ball a lot. I think RJ showed flashes in his rookie year that he could be a very good playmaker when he gets more experience in the league. While Levine is very good, I'd be very unwilling to let go of RJ to get him. Furthermore, I prefer to hold on to our first round pick. The draft pick will be very useful for the Knicks rebuild. Next year's draft is supposed to be stacked with young talent, so the Knicks would be wise to hold on to their draft picks for 2021. While Levine is a very fine talent, I'd be unwilling to part with a huge chunk of our valuable assets for him, especially since whether he's truly a player that moves the needle is very questionable, and that brings us to our next reason. The next reason I wouldn't trade for Levine is because I'm not convinced that he's truly a player that really helps your team win. Now, on the surface, Levine's stats make him look like an all-star, but I'd argue he's much closer to an empty numbers player than a true all-star player. For all the production, none of his teams that he's played for has come even close to making the playoffs. Despite Levine's 19 points per game in Minnesota, they never made the playoffs while he was there. And despite his gaudy stats in Chicago, the Bulls are nowhere near close to a playoff team. And I think a huge part of the reason Levine isn't able to bring his teams to the playoffs is his deficiencies as a player. One of Levine's biggest deficiencies is his horrible defense. Despite his insane athleticism, Levine has consistently been one of the worst defenders in the NBA. In fact, Bleacher Report made an article a couple of years ago where they ranked the most overhyped players in the league, and Zach Levine was on the list. And the main reason for this was defense. As it says in the article, in 2016 to 2017, he ranked 441st out of 468 players in ESPN's Defensive Real Plus Minus metric. Last year, he was 490th out of 521. Now, to be fair to Zach Levine, these are numbers from 2 years ago. Levine hears the chatter about his poor defense, and he has worked hard to get better on that end of the court. He isn't a rock bottom level defender anymore, but his defense is still pretty bad. In fact, this season, the Bulls head coach Jim Boylen benched Zach Levine in a game against the Miami Heat because of his bad defense. According to Boylen, it was 3 consecutive egregious defensive mistakes that caused him to yank Levine and put him on the bench. Along with being a horrendous defender, Levine also struggles as a playmaker. Yes, Levine's 4.2 assists per game look good on paper, but he's also turning the ball over 3.4 times a game. When you're coughing the rock up almost as many times as you're dropping a dime, your assist numbers aren't really helping the team. Levine is a capable passer, but with him being so turnover prone, I don't think he's ideally a lead guard in today's NBA. Ideally, Levine should be a secondary ball handler behind a really good point guard. But if you're asking him to be your primary playmaker, he'll put up nice stats, but your team isn't going to do much winning. So as we can see, Levine is very talented, but he's also very flawed. He's clearly an excellent scorer, but his defensive playmaking still leave a lot to be desired. Levine actually reminds me a lot of Julius Randle. Randle is the epitome of an empty stats player. Yes, his 20, 10, and 3 per game averages make him look like an all-star, but when you analyze the flaws in his game, you realize he's definitely not. To me, Zach Levine is a lot closer to Julius Randle, more of a good stats on a bad team type of player than a true bona fide all-star. I think Zach Levine is a pretty good number 3 option, maybe number 2 option, but if you're asking him to be a number 1 option on your team isn't going to go anywhere. On his own, Zach Levine isn't really a player that moves the needle. So if you're the Knicks, why would you give up valuable assets for a player who may just be an empty stats guy when you could develop RJ into a player who's even better than Zach Levine? The last reason I'm going to talk about why I wouldn't trade for Levine is that he's a major flight risk. If the Knicks trade for Levine, the clock will be immediately ticking for them to build a playoff team around him because Levine is actually set to become a free agent in 2022. Zach Levine has 2 years left on his contract after this season, and then he becomes an unrestricted free agent. This means the Knicks will have 2 years to keep Levine happy before he can just go wherever he wants. This makes a trade for Levine a huge risk, because worst case scenario, if the Knicks did trade for Levine and the Knicks continue to lose, Levine can just leave the Knicks and sign with the winning team in 2022. Then, the Knicks would have just given valuable assets to the Bulls for a rental and they're set back for years. If you're the Knicks, why would you take on that risk when you have RJ Barrett essentially locked up for the next 7 to 8 years? RJ has 3 more years left on his contract after this one. Then afterwards, he hits restricted free agency where the Knicks can match any contract offer. Rookie contracts are set up so that way teams can keep their players for the first 8 years of their career. In a few years, RJ can be just as good as Levine, if not better. As a rebuilding team, if I'm the Knicks, I'd rather just hold on to my assets and build around RJ than trade him for Levine and risk losing him in a couple years. With Levine set to be a free agent in 2022, the Knicks could just build organically and sign him outright when he becomes a free agent, instead of offloading their assets for him. So there you have it, Knicks fans. Those are my 3 main reasons why I would avoid a trade for Zach Levine. Do you agree or do you disagree with the video? I know a lot of fans are going to disagree and believe the Knicks should put their chips together for Zach Levine. So let me hear your reasoning in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your day, guys.